Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter with me, Martie McNabb. If you've been listening in or if you're new, I think that obviously things that matter, maybe that gives you a hint. I love the stories that get attached to the things that we surround ourselves with, that we adorn ourselves with, that we save, that we keep, that matter to us, that hold a story of a trip or a loved one or a family member or an experience at a concert or a poetry reading or our lives. Basically, we have these souvenirs that we surround ourselves. Our homes are our personal museums, right? And they all we chose it or it was given to us and or left to us when somebody passed away. And we end up by touching them and seeing them, we're able to remember these stories. So this is what I've been passionate about hearing the stories of these things that matter for over a decade. I've probably listened easily to thousands of these stories in my live events, the show and tell events that I host, and also when I do more private work. And speaking of private work, that is actually how I met today's guest. So Alyson Wagner and I met this past summer in August in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Everything Conference. So you've already heard about this conference from our previous guest, Annie Session. And also, I'm going to have another guest on, well, before this, Lisa with an R. So you'll hear her story as well. So the Everything Conference is a wonderful conference that was gathered together by three friends. And it basically, you know, that question when you're in business and everybody's like, well, you gotta pick one thing. Well, these people, right, right, Alyson, these people are like, oh, hell no, that would be considered death is to pick one thing, right? So these are multi-potentialites, people who do lots of different things and love doing lots of different things. And I was like, do I really fit in or not? I'm not really sure, but I love story sharing in all its different forms. And that's when I ended up being hired by the folks, the organizers of the Everything Conference, to bring a new experience, kind of new, called Things That Matter, which I did for the entire group. Like I think there was about 50 people in total. And hopefully a little later in the this program, I can ask Alyson about her experience with it. But I had a wonderful experience. I was just like, I set the stage and then I looked out and everybody was like in their groups of three, like just chatting away and just totally absorbed. And that's what I love. Sharing stories is such a powerful way to connect and build community. So without further ado, I am going to invite Alyson, who, by the way, led a wonderful experience for everybody at the Everything Conference, where she gathered us to go to a sculpture park there. And I'm just so grateful for these people who just like, what do they do? They just like offer these little gifts, these little gems, and that's what Alyson did with that. It was just so wonderful in addition to everything else. So again, without further ado, I am going to turn over the stage to Alyson for the show and tell section of this episode. So welcome, and I look forward to seeing what you brought to show and tell.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Marty. Yeah, I'm excited too that we finally get to do this. Um, and I actually picked my item, a different item than I guess what I'd originally intended to share. Uh, I love items that are passed down from family or friends, but I also love found items, and that's what this falls into the category of. Just to set the stage briefly, so earlier or beginning of this year, I set the intention that I really wanted to invite more art and creativity into my life. I've always considered myself a creative person, but in recent years, it's been more challenging to actually find the time and the space for that. So I decided this year, I just, whenever, however I can, I want to make more art. I want to experience more art. I just want to really invite that, more of that into my daily life because it's been such a great practice for me in centering myself and cultivating more joy, expressing myself, and as I've recently discovered, in healing as well. So that's leading into the thing. But at the beginning of February, I had a one-on-one session with a neurosomatic coach who essentially helps people get unstuck, like get unstuck from creative blocks and that kind of thing through neurosomatic practices like physical movement and things that help free up your nervous system so that your body feels safe for you to do the creative things. Um, and I shared with her that I was at a crossroads in my life and my career, not really sure where I was heading next, but I did know that I really wanted to create more space for freedom of self-expression, to be more truly myself in whatever I'm doing. And so she encouraged me to either choose something I already had or to find something that I could use as a talisman to remind me I'm free to be me. So fast forward um, a couple weeks later, after that session, I, as part of my intention to create and experience more art, I went to the Austin Creative Reuse Center, which is a secondhand, basically like a secondhand thrift store for art supplies in Austin. I'd never been, but I'd heard a lot about it. I was really excited to go, and I went there specifically for a workshop called Paint Like Georgia O'Keeffe. So it's basically like the instructor gave everyone blank canvases and some handouts of Georgia O'Keeffe's artwork. We could each choose one of her pieces as an inspiration piece to paint off of. And this is sort of, sorry, it's a little bit of a bait and switch because I'm not actually here to show the painting I did, which is, it's nice, but okay. Um, but what I found afterwards, after the workshop, which I did thoroughly enjoy, I visited, I explored the actual store, and they have all kinds of, secondhand stuff that's really cool, but they have a jewelry section for people who are into jewelry making. And I haven't done a lot of jewelry making myself, but I've always been a fan of like costume jewelry. And so I found this delightful little vintage owl pendant. I don't know anything about, how old it is, where it came from, but that's kind of part of the fun of it, right? I think so. I found this and I thought this would be a perfect talisman because I do like birds and owls. I've always considered myself a lover of knowledge and wisdom, and owls are, a traditional symbol of that. Furthermore, I'll bring it up closer to the camera so it's easier to see. But furthermore, one of the things that the neurosomatic coach encouraged me to look for in a talisman was something that had a color of significance to me. I decided to go with turquoise because that's my birthstone. So it may be a little hard to see, but this owl also has, I don't know if it's real turquoise, but they're little turquoise beads on it. So I thought, oh, that has some of my personal energy in it. And I discovered it's also a locket. Um, I didn't really know what I was going to put in the locket for a while, I'll be honest, after I brought it home. But then I realized I love collecting these little sayings from my yogi tea bags. I like to drink a lot of herbal tea. And I realized, hey, these little sayings are the perfect size, they can fit into this locket. So I have a few of them, and the one I'm keeping on top, I feel is very applicable for me right now, maybe for many of us, which says, "Be fearless. Know, know that all will be provided at the right time." And I have a few other meaningful little quotes and phrases in here, but I was so delighted, to find that, oh, I can also keep something of significance inside of this. So yeah, that's my little object. So it doesn't have a lot of history yet, but it obviously has prior history, which is something I'm fascinated in too. And I think it's a good creative exercise. Like I said, I have no idea where this came from, who owned it before me, where they got it from, who originally made it. I don't know any of that, but it's fun to imagine, right? So yes, this is my thing to remind
Oh,
me to be me. It's something I find myself clutching at times now. It's also a little bit of a worry object. I clutch when I feel like I need to remember who I am.
yeah. Oh, wow. That is, I love it. I love it. I love found objects. It's the first one that any of my guests have brought to my podcast or show, a found object like that, like specifically that was a piece of jewelry or even like vintage clothing or something like that. But I used to love doing vintage clothing, go and shop in vintage places. And I also was fascinated with these little stories like, I wonder who owned this and where it came from and stuff like that. So I love found. And it's so funny that you say about, I was just at the VINS, it's called the Vermont Institute of Natural Science here in Quechee, Vermont, and just had a introduction, just reintroduced myself to the owls and things like that they have there. So that's really neat. And I love that idea. Like it's you know, when I've hosted these events for so many years, I encourage people that, it does not have to, like you said, you love family history things or heirlooms that get passed down or somebody passed away and you keep it, like you love those things too. But it doesn't have to be something like that. Like it doesn't have to have this full story to still have meaning. And that's what because it's not really that things matter. It's the stories that get attached to the things that matter. And in your case, it's the story that you're welcoming into your life, like you're inviting into your life, and where that talisman will take you with it. So I love that. So needless to say, as you know, one of my other questions at the end of the show and tell section, um, and it was so great listening to, and like, you have to send me for the show notes these places, these suggestions of these, all the places that you suggested, this place that you can get artistic materials and things like that, and these classes. If there's obviously they offer classes too. So I'd love to have that in show notes because as I've talked to you about, I have probably at least 25 friends and family in the Austin area. So, yeah, yeah. So my dad's family, the McNabbs, are there, and then a bunch of friends over the years, location indie friends, and all of that as well that live there. So I'd love that information. And then, but to wrap up this section, have you considered what you would like to have happen with this thing when you're dead and gone?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not I'm not sure what will happen exactly. I don't have my own family. I don't have children. So I mean, otherwise that would be an obvious, oh yes, I'll hand it down to, my children. But that's not likely in the cards for me. So I'm thinking uh, if my best friend survives me, I've lived with her for a long time. If she survives me, I think she would be a natural person to pass it down to. She also loves creativity, loves owls, like loves a lot of the things that are represented in this item. So I know she'd appreciate it. And I will actually say this is a little bit of a confession too. When I first spotted this item, my first thought was, "Oh, my best friend would love this," and I was thinking of getting it her for her. But so full full disclosure. But then I found I didn't want to part with it. So maybe she'll get it eventually, right? That's my first thought. If she doesn't survive me, then I'm not sure. I haven't thought that far ahead what would happen to my stuff, but I would love for someone else to be able to find it in a similar way that I did. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I could put together a time capsule or a keepsake box with some of my, most treasured items. And by treasured, I don't necessarily mean like of monetary value, but of sentimental value like this. And maybe someone could find it. I don't know, who knows, at an estate sale, or maybe it will end up back at Austin Creative Reuse for someone else to, it'll be a new treasure, a new old treasure for someone else. I think I would love that if that's what happened to it.
There we go. I love that idea. So, is, making the box and, like a time capsule or your friend who you thought might really actually like it, but you're like, no, I'm going to keep it. And, or just being back in this space for somebody else to use as their talisman for creativity and remembering who they are. So that's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. So now is the time for you to share with our watchers and listeners here on Things That Matter how what more that you do and how they can find out about you more and connect with you. So I'm going to let you take it away again.
All right. Well, as Marty mentioned earlier, she and I met at the Everything Conference last August. So that already kind of sets the stage that this is not going to be a very straightforward answer. As yes, I do identify as multi-passionate. I love to do lots of different things. My exploration goes all over the place. So I'll try to be as coherent and concise as I can. So I think I will mainly focus on my side pursuits because what I've been doing to pay the bills is not as exciting or interesting, which is fine. But I will say that for most of my life, or pretty much all my life, I've identified as a creative person, which is probably not surprising given what I shared. I've always loved, especially like creative writing and making art. So that's always been a part of my life in some form or fashion. And now I'm looking to put, like I said, to invite more art into my life this year. And I'd like to invite more of that into the work I do as well. That's kind of a TBD right there. But um, I do know for sure that, yes, I love making creative content, whether it's writing or art. And I also really love inspiring and empowering people to learn and grow into their most authentic selves, like the best. I want to be the best me I can be, and I want to encourage other people to be the best versions of themselves that they can be too. So, one of the ways that I've been doing that recently is I started a Substack blog a few years ago called Snail Steps. And you can find that at AlysonWagner.substack.com, and I'll also send you that link, Marty, so you can include it in the show notes. But the tagline is creating a meaningful life one step at a time. And I started it a few years ago when I was facing a period of it just felt like unusual state of apathy for me. Very unusual because I've always been, multi-passionate. I can always find stuff to explore, right? So it felt very strange that I ran into a state of just feeling unmotivated to do anything. But I finally realized I'm burned out, which I know a lot of people were experiencing at that time. It was, in and out of the global pandemic that I started experiencing this. Um, and so one of the ways that I love processing is through writing. And I thought, if I start a blog, this would be a way to help me process my experience of burnout and how I'm working through that. And bonus, it would be wonderful too if I could get some readers and I could, maybe encourage and inspire other people who have experienced, similar struggles. So that was how Snail Steps was born, and I'm still writing it. as the I love I'm glad I chose the title Snail Steps because sometimes I am writing it at quite a snail's pace, but because one of the main focuses of the blog is to explore what it looks like to slow down, I give myself a lot of leash that, when I don't always manage to, publish a post, hey, I'm living what I'm preaching, right? And that's important. I mean, and seriously, because I thought if I'm running myself into the ground trying to, write a blog about slowing down, I'm not really a good example, am I? So I give myself a lot of grace for that. But um, anyway, so if people want to find me, that is one of the most, I think, current ways to find me, one of the most things I'm most excited about right now. I also have a website, AlysonWagner.com, which is kind of just more a mishmash of all the different creative stuff that I like to do. So people can also find me there.
Okay. So I'm going to switch here. There we go. So wonderful. That's great. I love this. I love the idea of snails and the snail steps. Is that what you say? Yeah. So I love that. It's more sliding. So with a lot of goo. It's really wonderful to see that, after they move, you see what's left behind. So it's a amazing experience. So yes, so please send me all of those things so that I can put them in the show notes. And as I had meant, so as I had mentioned earlier, well, two things. One is that I wanted to, when you were talking about maybe putting together a memory box or keepsake box, and the things that don't have financial value per se, but have sentimental value. Um, I to the listeners as well. I've been working on a little something like that because I'm just starting to put down plant some seeds about the idea of creating multi-author books, and they're going to follow the themes of things that matter, show and tell. So I've got 26 different themes, but I ended up realizing I needed to do one for myself first. And so this is just a prototype, and it's definitely very, very rough. Things that matter, but and specifically mine, which is my life in 30 things, as opposed to your life in 30. All the listeners, if you look around your museum, you can find 30 things that would tell a piece of your personal history. And mine specifically is going to be called Martifacts. Because it comes from my wife, who ended up, when I was traveling in Brooklyn, traveling around for a couple of months, I would invariably leave things behind at the friends that I was staying with in the driveway. I was in my van, but I was in the driveway. But invariably I would still leave things. And Judy just said, "Oh, what more martifact did you leave behind?" So anyway, I thank her for giving me that thought. Um, and so more to come on that, but I'm excited. I just started reworking on it, and thank you for the reminder of slowing down and giving yourself grace, because I think I put this together last spring, and it's been like in this same state since last spring, and it's like I just give myself some grace on that. So, and then one last thing before I'm going to close up, and it's just like if you could tell in a short way and a little snippet um, what your experience was like to come to the all group experience, the Things That Matter experience that I facilitated at the Everything Conference. I would love to have you share your experience.
Yeah, well, I would say it was delightful just to be, first of all, just to be introduced to this concept of, building an experience around the stories we tell about our meaningful things. And I love that idea. I think I would say I'm someone who's always placed a lot of value on items. So I love too that this is a way to make that sacred and special rather than, I don't know, at times I've felt like, am I materialistic because I like things? But I think, like you said, it's not really the things themselves so much as the stories behind them or the meaning that we ascribe to them. That's what I like about things. So I really liked being invited into that space. I loved what you shared, Martie, about, your experience of doing this work, collecting people's stories and sharing your own. And when we broke into the small groups, I think we were in groups of maybe like three or four. I was in a group with two other people, and we each had the opportunity to kind of share about an item that was meaningful to us. That was that was really interesting too to hear others' stories about um, what constituted meaning. And I will say the others who shared their stories, that's theirs to share. But I will say that um, I felt really moved by the stories I heard. And yeah, again, because it wasn't so much the thing, it was the whole story behind the thing of how this item, either transformed that person or helped them move through a difficult time in their life or whatever it was. Um, but how those things just carry such weight, because we look at these objects and we remember. Oh, yeah, um, this reminds me of that time or that experience, that lesson I learned. I can actually share as a bonus, real quick. I can share something. I didn't have it with me at the conference, but I have it now. That I remember the thing I talked about was my my denim bag, where I don't know if how it might be difficult to see
Go back a
close up,
little bit.
but it's got all these buttons on it. You can
Right
kind
here.
of see.
Yep.
Um, it's got all these buttons on it that I've collected from various events, places. And yeah, I don't know if you can see easily, but one of them says multi-potentialite, which I actually got at the first Everything conference several years ago. So this is an example of a thing that has multiple things of meaning on it. And I love that too. It's kind of like it's like a little memento album that I can put my stuff in.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience of that. Like I said, it was just magical for me because usually I'm facilitating one at a time, people sharing. And so I'm listening to every story and I'm like have to be hyper, aware of who's next and welcoming and all of that kind of stuff. And this one, I just kind of set the stage and everybody just went and it was just everybody leaned in, they were leaning towards each other. And it's just, I love what I do. I love helping build deeper connections, community, and legacy. And of course, it couldn't have been done at a better place than the Everything Conference with Joel and Vanessa and is it Charlie? Chuck? No. Who's the other?
Corey.
Corey and
Yes.
Corey. I had a my little brain fart, but anyway, they obviously they laid the stage over many years, so it lent itself beautifully for it. But yes, thank you for sharing that experience. And without further ado, I am, which is a new saying for me, apparently on this podcast or on this episode. But I want to thank everybody for listening in to this episode of Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. And also, thank you so much, Alyson, for joining me and sharing your stories. And I look forward to sharing them, sharing your story on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a delight.
Thank you. It was. I agree.